All right, welcome back. So let's talk about where on Earth is at risk for tsunamis, which is pretty much any coast. Pretty much. We're safe here in Arizona. But since tsunamis are typically oceanic in nature, you can get some in large lakes. But since they're typically oceanic in nature, pretty much if you are at or in proximity to the ocean shore, you could be at risk. Before we jump into it, let me give you part of the super secret code. It is the number 9. You got me? The number 9. One more time. The number 9. So I guess I've already addressed this. What areas of Earth are at risk for tsunamis? Pretty much all. But, if thinking about the triggers, earthquakes, volcanoes, landslides, asteroids, focusing more so on the earthquakes. That's really the main driver, as we saw on that one chart in section 1. 9 of the biggest tsunamis, or recent historic tsunamis, were caused by earthquakes, 1 by volcanic activity. So then, what areas of Earth are at risk for tsunamis? Well, probably where there's a lot of big earthquakes. Can you remember what type of boundary exists that might create a large earthquake? Convergent boundaries. So we have convergent boundaries all the way up the western edge of South America through Central America, kind of up into mid-U.S., up through Canada, Alaska, coming down into Asia, past Japan, through Indonesia. You even get some convergent boundaries kind of in through the Mediterranean Sea. So the greatest hazard is where you see these red, because these are convergent boundaries where there's subduction zones, and these are areas capable of producing a magnitude 9.0 or greater earthquake. They could produce an earthquake much less than that, but these types of boundaries really are the ones that produce those big magnitude earthquakes on the Richter scale. But no area is deemed super safe. So red is greatest hazard, yellow significant hazard, green, that doesn't mean safe, that means low hazard. So even on the eastern portion of the U.S., we're far from any boundary, but there still is a hazard of tsunamis, mainly due to there's a lot of volcanic activity in the Caribbean, some other random volcanic islands in the Atlantic Ocean that could produce a tsunami. Excuse me. We just don't have those convergent boundaries in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the reason that it's not that there's never ever been a tsunami here, it's just it is very rare and there's very little data to go on. So again, where we saw the red, we see these convergent. Where we saw the red on the previous map, we see these convergent boundaries. We see these convergent boundaries in all these locations. Where, the area was green, we don't really see that. All right, divergent boundaries. As mentioned, there is a convergent boundary down in the Caribbean earthquakes, but volcanoes, you get some volcanic activity in some of these hot spots as well that could create possible tsunami activity. But again, it's the highest hazard is near convergent boundaries. It's going to be your highest hazards. Ooh, excuse me, again, illustrated here. Remember, most earthquakes and volcanoes, more on that in a later unit, but they occur at convergent boundaries. And again, these convergent boundaries, just by the nature of the subduction zones and the amount of energy that's released when these plates finally slip and snap back, there's a lot of energy. And so that means we're looking at very high Richter magnitude earthquakes, and sometimes these earthquakes at subduction zones are known as megathrust earthquakes. Before I explain those to you, let me give you part of the super secret code. It is the number 1. You got me? The number 1. One more time, the number 1. So just a little diagram of how it works. So you got a convergent boundary. So this oceanic plate is crashing into this continental plate, so at the subduction zone. The overlying plate starts to kind of bend backwards. So you kind of, bending it and, putting a lot of energy in it, like pulling it back, like I'm bending this ruler. And once that energy is released, it snaps back. So when that occurs, when that fault finally slips and there's that movement occurs, that plate kind of snaps up, throws that oceanic water above it way up, and then it sloshes back down, radiates out in all directions, and that's what creates the tsunami. And so, yeah, the big ones, the historic ones, typically these mega thrust earthquakes are what did it. Obviously, a great example of it, touched on it a little bit earlier in a previous video, but the 2004 Indonesian tsunami. It was created by one of the largest earthquakes ever recorded. It was a mega thrust event. Remember, excuse me, I'm tired. Remember that there's really only been a handful of magnitude 9.0 earthquakes ever measured in recorded history on Earth. So this was one of the largest on record. It was a mega thrust event. The reason they had so much deaths is there's no warning system, so lack of infrastructure, lack of technology. There's no warning system in the Indian Ocean at the time to warn of these things. Few people knew what tsunami even meant prior to the event, so there was a lack of education was another reason for so many deaths. So many people did not know how to recognize a tsunami in Indonesia and some of the surrounding countries. Plus, there's a bunch of tourists and other first-generation residents. What was absolutely astonishing was many people went to the beach to watch. Again, I mentioned it in a previous video, but when a tsunami is coming, the water, if you're at the beach, the water rushes out and exposes all of this beach. All of this land that would otherwise be under the ocean. So it's kind of curious, like, wow, why is the ocean going away? And so people went down there to see what was going on. People went down there to get, like, fish and clams and stuff because all the water's gone. So now they could access all of these little organisms that were clinging to the bottom of the ocean. Now the ocean floor is exposed. So again, a bunch of people went down to watch what was going on, to exploit what was going on, and then sometime later, the tsunami came rushing in. So lack of education, lack of infrastructure and technology, no warning system. That's really what led to so many deaths. So the earthquake occurred just off the coast of Indonesia. Indonesia seeing the largest amount of deaths, but still 16,000 in India, 35,000 in Sri Lanka. And that tsunami made its way 7 to 8 hours, hit Africa. You have 289 deaths in Somalia. Again, there's no warning system. They didn't know this was coming. And so, again, imagine you're just at the beach and then you didn't know there was an earthquake. You didn't know there was a tsunami coming. And you can get kind of caught in it. So, yeah, so there were some people even in Africa, all the way on the other side of the Indian Ocean that died. Again, mega thrust earthquake events, so much energy is released, so much snapback in those plates, so much water is displaced that these tsunamis can race across an entire ocean. Some of the tsunamis that occur in Japan eventually hit California, racing all the way across the Pacific. So here's a before and after of an area of Indonesia. You can see just absolutely devastated. And again, this is just people staring at the tsunami. Here it comes. There it is. I mean, this guy's just kind of standing here. I think this kid's like, dude, what are you looking at? Just run. Just go. My guess is a number of those people died pretty soon after this picture was taken. That's my guess. Let me give you another part of the super secret code. It is the number 6. You got me? The number 6. One more time, the number 6. So let's pause there. When we come back, as we end all units, we'll talk about the impacts in society from this particular hazard. This is a bit of a longer section for this unit, so we'll probably have to break this one up into a couple videos, part 1 and part 2 for section 3. I'll see you back here in just a second for part 1 of section 3.